Welcome to the Mental Health Playbook, where we turn pressure into preparation and setbacks into strategy. I'm your host, Coach Trav, and I'm thankful to have you with me today. I got Lucky Rebel Sportsbook open with me today, so I can't lose. So, we got to start up the show with the mental health check-in, man. On a scale of 1 to 5, let me know how you're feeling. Let's normalize checking in on each other and checking in with ourselves to make sure that we're doing okay. I know for me, I'm at about a 3 right now because I'm a little bit under the weather, like fighting a lot of different things, but I'm excited at the opportunity to bring another episode to y'all and just battling all of the things, man. I'm thankful and grateful for all of the challenges, man. So other than feeling under the weather, man, I'm pretty thankful. I'm feeling pretty good. I'm excited about, just all of the things, moving forward. Sad that the summer's coming to a close. Let me know how the summer was for y'all, man. And, we got school starting this week, so salute to all of the teachers and educators going back into the schoolhouse, man. What y'all do is really, really important. I want to make sure we let y'all know that y'all are supported, man. From the podcast, from the Mental Health Playbook podcast to the Appraise the Phrase podcast. Like, we definitely appreciate educators and just education in general. We want to make sure that we don't lose the value in that. And as I say that, it made me reflect, man. One of the first things that my parents ever put me into before sports was tutoring, and that was the main thing that's one of the main things I'm grateful for. When I reflect on my life, like starting out as an athlete, I'm thankful that my parents started to put me in tutoring first before they even got me involved in any kind of sport. Like right now, I see, clips of, 4-year-olds out there with a football in their hand. And I think about my parents, man, like my tutor was like a second mom to me. And they put me in tutoring not because I needed it. They just wanted me to have a strong educational foundation. And like I was saying, my tutor was a second mom to me, man. I want to check on her to make sure that she's doing okay. But, tutoring's important. And I'm going to tell you why, especially when it comes to athletes. Like tutoring and education is important because it helps you build a strong foundation. And when it comes to sports, like a lot of times sports is simple as problem solving. And, that was one of the things I remember like dealing with when it came to my tutor, man. Solving problems. She would, put problems on paper for me and, have me get to it to figure it out. And I'm just thankful for that strong foundation. And that helped build my confidence when it came to being an athlete. Because a lot of times before I even had great coaching, a lot of it was just problem solving. If I move faster than this person, then I'll probably win. Like, there was just simple ways that I would just kind of, talk to myself and figure things out. But definitely thankful for, my parents put me in tutoring first, man. And shout out to my tutor, Miss Dolores Lyles, man. She had a major impact on my life, man. Just being an educator and being a person of faith and just speaking positive things into me before I even started to grow up. And just really thankful for that. But I want to get into today's show, man. I'm super excited coming off this week. I had a great week with my guys from WMA Sports. Got a chance to travel this week with my brother Edwin Piner, who's a lead agent, Vontre Long, myself, and also Kylan Lewis, who are also scouts for WMA Sports. Got a chance to hit up the personnel and recruiting symposium, and it was in Nashville. A really cool experience, man, something I'm really thankful for. Got a chance to network a lot, and the thing that I truly appreciate from this trip was just being blessed to see some people from back home in Miami. Ran into some coaches from the University of Miami, got a chance to chop it up a little bit with, Frank Tucker, who's on the staff now at the U. He used to cover high school sports down there in South Florida. So it was good to chop it up with him for a second because I know back in my time in Miami, we didn't get a chance to have a lot of discussions because usually if we were at practice or something, I'm usually coaching or dealing with my guys, whether it was the offensive line or the running back unit or, something like that. Anytime any outsiders came by practice, I rarely interacted with them. So it was good to, chop it up for a second and just catch up on things and how things are going. And just letting them know that I'm in Texas now and I moved on and happy for him while he's at UM. Ran into some other coaches as well. And it was just really cool just seeing a lot of familiar faces and also new faces too. Catching up with coaches from different programs and checking up on some of the guys who I'm excited about for this upcoming college football season. And, it was a really beautiful trip, just kind of catching up and also networking with those guys, man. But on that trip, I came up with, I had a moment to reflect. And I thought about the relationship between myself, Edwin Piner, and Vontre Long. And I asked them, if you was to go back in time to 2003 when we were all on, Howard University's football team, that being the year Me and Pioneer came in as freshmen, and Vontre was a senior at the time. Would we see ourselves in the future working together, working to educate athletes and represent them in the NIL space and represent them as an agency? And I think we all would have said no. We never would have imagined ourselves being in this space now as adults. When you're kids, you don't really think deep into the future like that. But it's truly a blessing to be in this space now, more mature, a little bit more educated, and just experienced, man. So I wanted to talk about being in college, but also taking the time to become the whole person. You know what I'm saying? So I was only a small percentage of myself. I was in a bubble. And so this episode is basically me having a conversation with 2003 Trav, right? If I can go back in time and tell myself something, I would tell myself to explore more, because I know as an athlete, all I ever did was all I wanted to do was just associate myself with athletic things. I had tremendous professors, but I didn't do the thing where I dug a little bit deeper to network with them. I didn't explore myself, and the way I think about college now was it's a buffet, man. So you get so many different things. You got Greek life, you got different areas of study and different professionals, and your professors are all in different careers. But I just ate that one dish over and over and over again at a buffet. And so, this is a conversation to myself, but also to young athletes that are in college, or young athletes in general. Being an athlete or being a competitor is only a small percentage of who you are as a person. So let's make sure that we do the thing to grow. And so I want to take this in today's episode, man. And the playbook for today is to avoid the identity trap, right? Making sure that we become more than an athlete. So let's hop into it. Coach Trav, this is the Mental Health Playbook. Let's dive into today's episode. So I'm excited because we're transitioning from the summer to the fall, and football preseason is around the corner. And right now, Lucky Rebel has my Dolphins favorite this week coming up. I'm excited to see the product that we have. And it's good to know that we're favored for a change, right? So, shout out to Lucky Rebel for that. And I'm excited to see the product. But when I think about the Dolphins, I also think about my mom, because she raised me a Dolphin fan, and she also teases me about it, right? We used to rush home from church on Sundays, man, and get to it with them rival games against the Bills and Jim Kelly, and against the Jets and the Patriots. And at the time, the Colts were in our division as well. And it was just a good time, bro. So I think about that, man. That's my first thought as I think about preseason football and how it's coming up for us at the end of this week. So shout out to my mom, man. I'm super thankful for both of my parents, my mom and my dad, for not just putting me in the box when it came to being an athlete. That wasn't the sole focus on who they wanted me to become as an adult. And I want to make sure we have that conversation today, man, for everybody else. Because even though, my parents encouraged me to be, they didn't put me in a box, but the time that I should have taken to explore more or break away was my freshman year at Howard University, right? So I think about growing up, and how the athlete label gets reinforced to us, right? So growing up, sports often starts off as something that we love doing. For me, I enjoy football. I love playing baseball. But our schedules, our friendships, recognition, opportunities, and conversations can all evolve around sports, right? And that's where we start to internalize that label of just being an athlete. Nobody wakes up and decides that their sport will become their entire identity. It just happens a little by little over time. So, after years of conditioning, especially when you might go out to a family function, or everybody just has these expectations, right? Where, you're going to go to the NFL, right? You're going to be this big star. You're going to go to the NBA, and you're going to buy your mom a new house. You're going to buy your dad a new truck. All of these things, start to happen where these conversations are had. And it starts to mold our mind into thinking that we can be just this one thing and this one thing only. And so, number two, it starts identity foreclosure, when that becomes the only answer. So after years of hearing it, we want to make sure we avoid, that's how we start to identify ourselves. When I ask, if you meet somebody for the first time and the only thing you can say is, my name is John Doe and I play for so-and-so and so-and-so. Man, this is your opportunity to be more than that. be excited about, explaining your hobby to someone else or exploring that. So we definitely have an identity foreclosure issue where we start to feel like that's the only way to introduce ourselves, and we start to think of ourselves as only that one thing. And we also have an issue when performance becomes our self-worth, right? And this is where the identity trap gets really dangerous because, if an athlete, starts to think about what happens when we struggle, or if we deal with an injury or getting benched or losing our starting spot, whenever we face a little bit of adversity, like that's the difference between, I didn't perform well and I'm not good enough. And we start to just feel like that one, like we tie our whole being into that one moment, and that can put us in an area where we start to spiral a little bit, man. So I want to make sure that we avoid that and start having different conversations. And if I can go back to 2003 to freshman year Trav at Howard University, I would definitely encourage him to, hey man, explore more, because I definitely put myself in the box, man, where all I did was associate myself with my athletes, or I didn't take the time to explore. And the best way I could describe it to you all out there is college is where you're like at a top tier buffet restaurant where you have, like you go to a buffet and you have your Mexican section over here, you have your American section over here, you have seafood over here, and then you have Italian over here. So the best way I could explain it, and the mistake that I made, was my favorite food is pizza, and I just ate pizza every day while on college campus. And I probably did a little bit of that too, like literally. But what I'm saying to the audience and to my young athletes out there, to my listeners, is that I put myself in a box where I only, spoke to the small percentage of myself that was an athlete. I didn't think to, or I didn't recognize or appreciate that I was on a campus full of our nation's future leaders, game changers, people who are going to change the world. You know what I mean? So the best thing to do is to explore and, meet different people from different areas. But I just kept myself in that bubble where I just stuck close to my teammates, and that was it. Like that was my number one priority. So again, when you're going into college in your freshman year, your biggest responsibility is getting acclimated fast to the academic requirements, like going to class and handling business in the classroom, and also your athletic requirements, man. That adjustment or that jump from high school to college, those workouts are a huge jump from high school to college, because I feel like some high schools, man, we don't work out hard enough, and so when we go to college for the first time, and that workload could be challenging for us, and it's sink or swim. So another thing is making sure that we're able to balance that newfound freedom with our social lives. So those are the three things that I definitely struggle with. But if I had to go back in time to, young Trav in 2003, I would encourage him to explore more, and know that you're only speaking to a small percentage of yourself when it comes to being on this campus and being around all of this knowledge with, your classmates who are going to grow and do great things as entrepreneurs and educators and just world changers. You're on a campus full of educators and professors who are, willing and able to do anything to share the knowledge that they have. And I think about that, and also professors like Dr. Carr, who I had the chance to network with, or not network, but I ran into him a few homecomings ago, and I was able to give him his flowers and just thank him for the knowledge that he continues to give to Howard students or anybody that's willing to listen, and just share that knowledge and pride of just what it is to be, who it is, what it's like being in this country, and just, sharing knowledge in that regard. And I was able to tell him, like, hey, I appreciate you, but I was also willing to admit to him that I wasn't mature enough at the time to appreciate the messages that he had for us back then. But I definitely was able to give him his flowers in real time, and I let him know that, at this date, he's an inspiration to me to inspire others and just give back in that regard the same way he gave back to us, when we were students. And I just wasn't mature enough to handle that at the time. But going back to it, I definitely would approach it with a different mindset, being more open, and especially after I was able to navigate that first year and getting things figured out. Now it's time to explore this buffet restaurant and tap into the different dishes that we have and that we had all over that campus. So when I reflect on my time in DC, right, and I think about what 18-year-old Trav is experiencing for the first time being off in college, like what really surprised me about DC and the culture was one, Mambo sauce, like that being a thing and enjoying that. I remember the first time like having Mambo sauce from Howard China and it just blew me away. It was on some cold fries and I just like couldn't stop eating it and that thing just blew me away. The strong rivalry between the back then it was the Redskins and the Cowboys, but the Commanders and the Cowboys, that rivalry was something strong and it ran deep and it feels like half the area of DC like is split from being Commanders fans and Cowboys fans, and that was something that always intrigued me because it was just like, you know, you expect the home city to have like for everybody to be fans of just like the home team. You know, so over at Lucky Rebel this year, the Commanders are sitting at plus 460 to win the NFC East. You know, we starting the season out with a healthy Jaden Daniels. And, you know, we got a strong backing with them to exceed expectations. So I'm excited for the city of D.C. to see what it like, you know, to see what, for them to have a franchise quarterback and to see what they do this year. So when I think about my time in D.C. as well, like I want to talk about making sure we do the things to discover the other 90% of who we are as a person. Because being an athlete is only like 10% of who we are, but it gets mistaken for being our whole identity. But let's talk about exploring the other 90% and how we get to go about doing it. Like I mentioned earlier, we got to give ourselves permission to explore. So if I'm talking to, 18-year-old Trav, 2003 Trav, hey, bro, get out on this campus and explore. Talk to your professors and, grow outside of who you are when it comes to being an athlete, because right now this is the only way that this is the only way that you view yourself, and you're more. And when I reflect and I think about my last semester, right, was when I really started to take a chance on things. And one of the things that I did, and I have no regrets of doing, because it was a great time was had. Like I went down to the School of Communications and I auditioned to be a radio show personality for the school radio station. Shout out to my brother, Dion and, Crystal and Rainika Grant. And we all just had a ball down there running our school radio station. So this was like me getting a chance to explore myself like outside of sports and just being a whole radio personality. And it's funny because that was so long ago, but that was something that I always wanted to do in the back of my mind, but just never did the things to figure out how to do it. But I took a chance on that, and they became a people that I could still consider to be some close friends of mine, man, because, when I did hit some hard moments during my time in college, man, those are the people I was able to rely on. Like I was able to crash on that couch for a little bit until I was able to figure things out. And this was like, when I was getting ready to graduate, and even though I started, my eligibility was up, but I still had like one more semester to go because there was just this one class that I was struggling with. And but I stayed. I crashed on that couch for one little moment, for one half of summer term or something like that. But it was a great time. I worked at Bally's and they did their things, working at radio stations and bartending. But they became a group of friends that were more like family because they kind of took me in and we got a chance to know each other through the school radio station. So it was just like I took that chance to explore towards the end of my time at Howard, and it's something that I wish I would have did. I wish I would have taken that chance earlier to figure out the things, right, to explore more and give myself permission to do that, because up until that time I just kept myself in a box. Like if you weren't really an athlete, I didn't really think to build a relationship with you. And this was, in all sports, like, the athletes usually stayed in one specific dorm, or, we'd probably hang with each other, or I hang with my teammates or sit next to my teammates in the classroom. And so just want to encourage, like, other young athletes to do that thing, like take a chance and explore something new, make new friends. Don't put yourself in that bubble or box. You know what I mean? Because a lot of people look up to you, like you have the ability of influence as well. So, take that time to build those relationships, man. And another thing I want us to do is just like another mistake that we make is when we, asking what do I want to do? And here's the thing that we hear. What are you going to do after sports? What are you majoring in? What career do you want? And those are important questions. But here's the mistake that we make. Like, it still defines us by what we do. But we got to start asking questions like, what do I value? What brings me joy? What am I curious about? Who do I enjoy helping? And so the thing that I was curious about and didn't know it was just like, being a radio personality, and what would that be like? Because that was a whole other side of my personality that people didn't really get a chance to know, right? I got a chance to be silly a little bit, crack jokes. People found out I have like a sense of humor. Like, in the football realm or in the football world, like, I was really just one way. I did expand on how I was a leader to my teammates, but being a radio personality, like, that got a chance, that allowed me to just relax a little bit. And at that time, like, football was no longer like a part of who I was, because I was done playing. Like, the season had finished in the fall, and this was now spring, and this was like that last time when I was trying to finish up these last few classes to graduate. And that was when I took that time, that last semester, to just take that chance, man. I built a relationship that I'm still close with these guys to this day, because of that time down at the radio station, man. And I remember, like, not too long ago, my friend, my brother Dion, like, he found some footage of our old radio shows, man, and we just listened and laughed at just how silly how silly we were, and the content that we was putting out at the time. We felt like we was ahead of our time. So, but I wish I would have explored that a little bit earlier. Like, once I got a grip on how to navigate football and the academics and the social life, now taking the time to explore me, right? And doing the things that I've been curious about, and just exploring more, because I was in the school of psychology, but this was me in the realm of communications. And so I want to make sure that, I encourage you all to do the same thing. And if I had a chance to talk to, 18-year-old Trav, 2003 Coach Trav, man, like, hey, do the things and do it early. Like, once you figure out how to balance, football, your social life in the classroom, hey, let's figure out yourself, man. But number 3, we got to start developing ourselves the same way, like, we develop ourselves as athletes. So, develop the person with the same intensity that, we take to develop ourselves as athletes. Like, when we think about sports, like, we have film study, we have weight room, practice, nutrition, recovery, position training, like getting the extra reps after practice, and all of these things. But how much time are we investing when it comes to developing the person wearing the uniform? And what I mean by that is, like, what are we reading? Who are we networking with? Like, encouraging each other to travel, like volunteering. And the biggest thing that I would tell 2003 Trav, and I want to share with all athletes out there of today, take the internships, man. Like, if you're up in school for a summer, don't be afraid to take an internship and just build relationships and start to network. Talk to the professionals. Build the relationships with your course instructors and your professors, because they're more than just professors, right? So, and they'll be happy to share, information with you, man. So I want to make sure that, we get those things down, and that's how we start to explore, who we are. But, shout out to Howard University, man. And, they played a great part in shaping who I am today. That sense of pride that I have, and I am truly grateful for that experience. And I'm super excited this year, man. This year we're facing Morehouse for homecoming, and I'm excited to take a look at the Lucky Rebel odds when that time closes as we get closer to kickoff. And that game is October 17th, and I'm definitely going to be in the building. And like I said, I'm gonna check the odds at Lucky Rebel to see where we stand. But I'm super excited about what we got going for this upcoming season. I want to make sure that we understand something, like, when it comes to, like, this topic, and I want to make sure that we know that you don't have to lose yourself as an athlete to find a person, right? And I think that's why I elected to highlight Kelsey Mitchell, in the Indiana Fever to start the show for the MPP Spotlight, because she's having a great year. Lucky Rebel has the Indiana Fever at plus 1,500 to win the championship, but she's having an MVP-like season, and, people are learning who she is, and her game is incredible. She's great from 3. And she's just a great scorer, man. Like, she's exciting to watch. but she's a person who's also exploring herself outside of the sport of basketball and pursuing her doctorate degree. And that's powerful. Like, she's learning herself and she's not sacrificing who she is as an athlete as well. Like, so you don't have to, it doesn't mean like you have to distance yourself from the sport, and you don't have to stop loving competition. It's just a matter of just, taking the time and the courage to explore who you are outside of it, knowing that we can grow and making sure that we don't limit ourselves and put ourselves in the box, right? So I'm a pivot and go in this direction. Like, when it came to winning championships, right? When I was coaching running backs, I asked that group, in order for us to be successful at the next level, at the college level, we have to do things when the ball is not in our hands. That's what's going to carry us and make us successful at the next level. So normally, when you look at the running back position, it's about, people look at it and think about what you do when the ball is in your hands, like, jump cuts and making people miss and long runs. Like, all of that stuff is cool, but everybody thinks they can do it. But the thing that'll get you playing time at the collegiate level is what you do when the ball is not in your hands. That's the thing that'll catch the coach's eye. It's, are you willing to block for your teammates? How serious are you taking that? Blocking or catching out the backfield and not just being a one-trick pony. So it's one of the things where I want to make sure that we ask ourselves, like, we take the time to explore and figure out who we are beyond the sport that we play. And the reason why I kind of pivoted from coaching physically is I wanted to make sure that I was a visual example for my athletes to see, hey, you can be more. Like, I'm asking them as a coach to be more than an athlete, but I wanted to be a visual example for them to understand, like, okay, I know Coach Trav is a championship winning coach. Like, he demanded a lot from me, but it's cool to see him in a different light where he's podcasting and public speaking and doing the things and growing. And not just, staying in a space that he's mastered. You know what I mean? So I wanted to be that visual example for my athletes, man, because I can't ask them to be more and me not challenge myself to be more as well. And to my next point, too, like, your identity should be able to evolve, right? Like, Coach Trav is evolving into, like I said, a public speaker and a podcaster and all of these things, a scout at WMA. Like, I'm not just limited to just being an athlete and coaching. Like, I still have a strong relationship with the game of football. Like, I still have a strong connection with it, but I am not just associated with being just a coach on the sideline and that's it. And the reason why I stepped away to these new challenges because I felt like I mastered that, and I wanted to experience what it's like to be a beginner again and start at something and not be great at it, but continue to put the work in to become great. And this was the same philosophy and mindset when I was an offensive line coach, right? Like, it's week zero. Week zero's coming up in high school football, meaning it's like the kickoff classics and the first games of the season that don't count. You just kind of go, you play your game, you go through your routine, your schedule, your starters, your backups, and all of the things. And it's like a game day walkthrough, but you have like a kickoff game where you can kind of put some stuff on film and evaluate where you are as a team. So whenever there was a kickoff classic or the first couple of games of the season as an offensive line coach, like, I wasn't expecting my offensive linemen to be champions week 0 or week 1 or week 2 or week 3. The goal was to get better each week and make sure we finish the season as champions. That was the goal. So in me starting in these new spaces when it comes to public speaking and podcasting, it's the same thing for me. It's the same thing for Coach Trav. Like, being a novice and being a beginner, being nervous and not mastering the things, but learning along the way, making mistakes. But the whole thing is to make sure that you don't quit. And so I want to make sure that we don't quit on ourselves, man, and be able to take the time and take the steps to learn who we are outside of the sports that we play, man, and not just limit ourselves. Because if we do, like, the world is going to tell us, or the world is going to put us in the box if they can. And if we do it, we're already doing them a favor. The same way when we want to, speak up and talk about, women's rights or police brutality or social injustices and all of the things, like, you have to have the courage to do that and do those things. And it's like, I want to make sure that we don't put ourselves in that box and not feel confident enough to speak out in the things that we care about. But if we do put ourselves in the box and they tell us to shut up and dribble, then we'll do just that. We'll be regulated to our sport, and that's it. So the last point I want to make sure that we understand is like wholeness gives you something performance can't take away. And when I think about that, it's like, especially in today's world, if you make a mistake, if you miss a shot, if you have a bad game, man, the world can't wait to pounce on you. They can't wait to have you to be a topic on a show or a topic of a podcast or anything where they're just like coming down on you in a negative light. But when you're whole and, you understand that, you're more than an athlete, you're a son, you're a daughter, you're a leader, you're a mentor, you're all of these things. Like, not one bad performance can erase like what you believe about yourself. So it's important that you understand, like, when you become a whole human being and you know that being an athlete is only a small portion of who you are. You're a great mother, you're a great father, like you're an entrepreneur, you're a leader. You started a business that grows beyond sports. Like, that's a beautiful thing that people can't take away from you. And so I want to continue to encourage us to go off in that space, man, to be those things and to check out the MPP Spotlights where we highlight different individuals who are growing beyond the sport that they play, and they're being a living example of that. Like I talked about Chris Bosh last week, and what he means and how he values education and things of that nature, man. And I want us to lean into the things that we enjoy in private, man, and come out and start to express that and share that and embrace that, because that helps us become the whole person, and being the whole person makes us the better athlete. For the Mental Health Playbook quote of the day, I got a quote from Aristotle, something that fits today's episode perfectly. And he says, "Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom." I want you to sit with that for a second. And I'm going to read it again. Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. The reason why that's important is because you can't build what you don't understand. Like we're talking about becoming a whole person, right? And not just relying on that 10% of us who's an athlete, or just like relying on that side of us. Like, you got to start understanding or studying, us, looking in the mirror and having that conversation. And I think that's why that quote hits home. And I want us to start doing that too. Like, when we go off to college and we kind of have this space to learn ourselves and grow, like, that's the best time to do it, because we're away from home. We get a chance to explore. We have a huge campus with people from all over the world, and we get a chance to just take a deep dive, right? And just learn the things about what makes us who we are, to learn why we feel the way that we feel, to ask ourselves certain questions. What do we value? And that's when you really start to acquire wisdom, when you start to learn yourself. And you also learn what not to respond to, because there are going to be things said or done to you that's going to try to make you or throw you off track. But when you have a knowledge of who you are as a person, you're going to be slow to respond in a negative way. So it's important that we understand and learn and just know ourselves, man, because that's where the beginning of wisdom lies, man. Like, learning and studying ourselves. So that was a great quote by Aristotle. Definitely wanted to share that for today's Mental Health Playbook quote of the day. As we close out today's episode, I want to come back to the question we started with. Who are you? Not what position do you play, not what school you compete for, not how many offers you have, but who are you? And I would love to go back to 2003 and ask young Trav that same question. Because if the only answer to that question is I'm an athlete, then that means there's still parts of ourselves that needs to be discovered. And that's not something to be afraid of. It's something that we should get excited about. Because being an athlete has already given us a lot, right? The discipline, the relationships, the confidence on the field, resilience, and the different opportunities and the memories with our teammates. But it's even taking us places that I never imagined I'd go, right? I had no idea that I'd play football overseas and live in Paris long enough to embrace the culture, right? A lot of times people have a trip like that and it's just for a couple of days, maybe a week, 2 weeks at the most. But I got a chance to live and embrace the culture for a full season, and that's something that can't be taken away. But there's a thing where when it's time to grow beyond that, and the self-discovery and We deserve to be curious about ourselves and explore our interests and to develop our gifts and build relationships outside of the sport. It's to walk into different rooms. Like, we got to be afraid to try the things that we're not immediately great at. And that was something I've been pretty fortunate to do. And I want to make sure that I want to just plant the seeds early where we have that conversation, and just to let you know that being an athlete is only a small portion of who you are as a person. So let's work to grow to become the whole individual. And so with that being said, another great example I like to look towards is, I think Magic Johnson is a good example, because when you first hear his name, the Laker purple and gold comes to mind. Playing with Kareem and winning championships in that regard, being a person of his size with the ability to pass and the vision that he had was pretty incredible. And, and to think of him in that regard, but also now as, part owner of the Dodgers, like, he's been dominating in life outside of his playing days as a retired athlete. Being part owner of the Dodgers, where Lucky Rebel has the Dodgers favored to win the World Series again. And, Magic Johnson having plenty of businesses that he's run. I think he's a great success story, and it should be talked about more. But he's an example, along with some of the others that's been highlighted during the MPP Spotlight, that we're more than the sport that we play. So we can't be afraid to take that step and take that leap to figure out who we are outside of the sport and just growing ourselves and sharing our gifts with the world as we learn who we are. All right, I'm Coach Trav. That's today's episode. Catch y'all next time. What's up, everybody? I want you to be sure to subscribe to the Mental Health Playbook playlist on the Produced by ATP YouTube channel, brought to you by the Underdog Podcast Network, and join us as we continue to explore the stories of athletes, coaches, and leaders who turn adversity into impact and build legacies that continue long after their moment has passed. I'm Coach Trav. This is the Mental Health Playbook. Catch y'all next time.